Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jean Saludades. I'm the program chair of the ASEAN Studies Graduate Program. Welcome to the ASEAN Studies Lecture Series. This is a continuation of the ASEAN Studies Lecture Series that was initiated in November 2011 with the maiden lectures delivered by speakers from the OU5, the five open universities that jointly crafted the framework of the ASEAN Studies Graduate Program, namely the Universitas Terbuka of Indonesia, the Open University of Malaysia, the University of the Philippines Open University, the Sukhothai Thammathirat Open University of Thailand, and the Hanoi Open University of Vietnam. Today's lecture is jointly organized with the Asian Center of the UP Diliman in celebration of the foundation of the ASEAN organization. The lecture is web streamed, thus students of the Asian Studies graduate program and colleagues elsewhere can join the celebration. To give a fitting welcome, may I invite the Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs of the UP Open University, Dr. Melinda Lumanta.
Thank you very much, Vice Chancellor Jean. And thank you all for joining us this afternoon as part of the Asian Studies Lecture Series. Magandang hapon po sa ating lahat. As we know, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, was established on August 8, 1967 in Bangkok, Thailand, with the signing of the so-called ASEAN Declaration or the Bangkok Declaration by the founding fathers of ASEAN, namely Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, and Thailand. This year, on the occasion of the 48th anniversary of the establishment of ASEAN, the UP Open University celebrates the event through the ASEAN Studies Lecture Series. Last February, as already mentioned, UPOU organized an international symposium in ASEAN Studies, or what we termed as ISAS. It was part of UPOU's thrust to thicken the discourse on ASEAN studies by hearing the diverse ASEAN voices as we continue to conceptualize what ASEAN means to various stakeholders. We like to think and we claim that UPOU is the home of the Asian Studies Graduate Program, consisting of a graduate certificate program and a master's program. It was launched last year, and to date, we have about 120 students already enrolled. In fact, we graduated four of them from the graduate certificate program after its first year of offering. The journey we took to get to where we are is known to all. The program was collaboratively developed with four other open universities, as already mentioned. In the spirit in the spirit of true collaboration, the program was conceptualized and courses developed through a long but certainly rewarding 5 or so years. The five open universities, which we lovingly call the OU5, included the OUM of Malaysia, the Universitas Terbuka of Indonesia, STOU of Thailand, Hanoi Open University, and of course UPOU. The collaboration continues even to this date as we engage in Asian studies research among the OU5 institutions. We have also forged collaboration with other like minded individuals and institutions, among them the Asian Studies Center of UP Diliman. And so as you said already earlier, we co-organized this lecture series with the Asian Center. We are happy to have with us today no other than the Dean of the Asian Center. Allow me to welcome Dean Jofe Santa Rita once again to UPOU. and of course his team who joined him today. And of course, to this lecture series, all the students and faculty members of the Asian Studies program who are joining us here in this venue and also via live web streaming. Also to the UPOU officials, faculty, reps, and staff who are here with us to participate in this very informative session. So with that, maraming salamat po ulit sa inyong pagdalo.
Thank you, VC Lumanta. As mentioned, as mentioned, the lecture series was initiated for us to hear the voices of the scholars of ASEAN studies, as well as eternalize, if I may use the term, such voice through the digital technology. It's recorded. For this afternoon, we shall listen to no less than the Dean of the Asian Center, Dr. Jove Santarista, who shall speak on ASEAN in Southeast Asia, a cultural region.
Good afternoon. Before I present my paper, I would like to thank UP Open University for organizing this lecture series and for allowing the Asian Center to co-organize this activity as part of our ASEAN Week celebration despite short notice. Special thanks to Chancellor Alfonso, of course, to VC Lumanta, VC Saludades, and even Dean Booth and the staff for this opportunity to present to you in front of you this afternoon. Now, my presentation is entitled ASEAN. I'm tempted to use the word ASEAN, but I think to be faithful with how it is pronounced by our colleagues in Southeast Asia. So I should say ASEAN. ASEAN in Southeast Asia, a cultural region. Why I'm putting ASEAN in Southeast Asia? Because we have to clarify that in a region, the concept of region is very important, and the region of Southeast Asia is composed of 11 rather than 10. So the ASEAN countries only composed of, I mean, there are only 10 countries, and we have to include Timor-Leste for that. So just to give you an overview, so an outline right rather is that I'm going to discuss, no, the flow of my discussion will be Southeast Asia, an overview. So I'll give you a background why we need to study Southeast Asia right now. And then we'll try to revisit the terminology culture region or cultural area for that matter, and the region from cultural perspective. And then we look at in terms of the neglect of cultural regions as part of colonial legacies, or I may say colonial blunder, in the context of studying Southeast Asia. And of course, I'd like to see later on present some of the prospects, how to make use of cultural region as a concept, and to revisit maybe the alternative paradigm in discussing ASEAN in Southeast Asia. And of course, I'll try to provide a conclusion later on before your open forum. So, Southeast Asia, as I mentioned, consists of 10 countries of ASEAN and Timor-Leste that reached, expanded its territory from eastern India to China and is divided into mainland and island zones. So the mainland, in fact, some authors would use still Burma or Burma for that matter. I use the word Myanmar because it's the present name. Thailand or Siam at the time, Laos or Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam, which is actually, in fact, these are the extension of the ancient continent. Whereas island or maritime Southeast Asia includes Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, Philippines, Brunei, and of course, the new nation of Timor-Leste. All of Southeast Asia lies between the tropics, and so there is similarities in climate as well as plant and animal life throughout the region. It is observed that temperatures are generally warm, although cooler in highland areas, just like here in the Philippines, Baguio, and of course, even in the northern part of Vietnam, where they have the subtropics. So, in the description of Southeast Asia, I'd like to quote at length the description made by noted Southeast Asianist, Dr. Barbara Watson Andaya, about Southeast Asia. And she said that all of Southeast Asia lies between the tropics, and so there are similarities in climate as well as plant and animal life throughout the region. And many of the sea and jungle products are unique to the region and were therefore much desired by international traders in early times. For example, several small islands in eastern Indonesia were once the world's only source of cloves, nutmeg, and maize, so like Moluccas and Malacca. The entire region is also affected by the monsoon winds. So aside from geography, you have the climate and the wind direction. So these monsoon winds, which blow regularly from the northwest and then reverse blow from the southeast. So we have the concept of habagat and amihan. These wind systems bring fairly predictable rainy seasons. And before steamships were invented, these wind systems also enabled traders from outside the region to arrive and leave at regular intervals. So these migrants and sailors were the first OFWs, the sea-based. Because of this reliable wind pattern, Southeast Asia became a meeting place for trade between India and China, the two great markets of early Asia. And that will perhaps explain in the later part why our culture is so diverse because of these influences. So the presence later on of Hinduism and Buddhism, Islam on the later part, because of the Arab traders, uh, definitely make the culture of Southeast Asia very interesting, diverse, and very rich. So there are also differences in terms of the physical environment of mainland and Southeast Asia. But before I proceed to that, let me just show you at least an overview of the present, even in terms of the population and the density and the area of each country. And if you notice then, the Philippines is one of the highest in terms of the density. But of course, the highest is Singapore, and that is understandable because Singapore is too small, and yet they have about 4 million people, 5 million. And of course, followed by Vietnam, no? The third will be Vietnam. So at least you have that idea of how big is the population of Southeast Asia, more or less about 6 million population, 6 billion, ano, million people or inhabitants all in all. Now, in terms of the cultural group, you notice then that, although this cultural group you'll see it's not Indonesian because I think maybe it's Malay. Yeah. But if a big chunk of that, the blue colored figures, of course, the Philippines, Malaysia, and Indonesia, and parts of Irian Jaya of Papua New Guinea, considered to be part of under the category Indonesian. But to correct that, I think we should put that under Malay or Austronesian, okay? If it is considered under language. Okay? So aside from this, before I proceed to the cultural region, I'd like to point out that there are some differences in the physical environment of mainland and island Southeast Asia. For the mainland geography or the geography of mainland Southeast Asia, there are three features. The first is that the geography of mainland Southeast Asia is the long rivers that begin in the highlands separating Southeast Asia from China and Northwest India. And take note that water is not a barrier, but is actually the facilitator of change and exchange. And therefore, most of the early civilizations and centers that existed or that emerged in Southeast Asia are located near bodies of water. The second feature is the extensive lowland plains separated by forested hills and mountain ranges. These fertile plains are highly suited to rice-growing ethnic groups such as Thais, the Burmese, and the Vietnamese, who developed settled cultures that eventually provided the basis for modern states. The highlands were occupied by tribal groups who displayed their sense of identity through distinctive style in clothing, jewelry, and hairstyles. The third feature of the mainland Southeast Asia in terms of its geography is the long coastline. Despite a strong agrarian base, the communities developed in this region were also part of the maritime trading network that linked Southeast Asia to India and China. And this is best exemplified by the presence of various thalassocratic polities. Thalassocracy means it's a maritime polity or kingdom. Thalassa or talas for that means sea, and Socratic or Cratic for that is Kratin for rule. So those who ruled the sea, and therefore we have so many, even the Chams and other early kingdoms in Southeast Asia. As for the maritime Southeast Asia, one main feature is the size, because the islands of maritime Southeast Asia can range from a very large, for instance, Borneo, Sumatra, Java, and even Luzon in the Philippines, to tiny pinpoints on the map. Indonesia is said to comprise about 17,000 islands. Because the interior of these islands were jungle-clad and frequently dissected by highlands, land travel was never easy. Southeast Asians found it easier to move out or to move by boat between different seas. Kaya nga sinabi ko that the sea is not the barrier but facilitator of change and exchanges. And it is often said that the land divides and the sea unites. The oceans that connected coasts and neighboring islands created smaller zones where people shared similar languages and were exposed to same religious and cultural influences. And please, I may reiterate this, the modern borders created by colonial powers, which is actually my point later on, between Malaysia, for example, and Indonesia, do not reflect logical cultural divisions. Okay? Let me repeat that. The modern borders created by colonial powers, example between Malaysia and Indonesia, do not reflect logical cultural divisions. And I'm going to point out that later on. The second feature of maritime Southeast Asia is the seas themselves, no? The sea. Apart from a few deep underwater trenches, the oceans are shallow, which means that they are rather warm and not very salty. This is an ideal environment for fish, coral, seaweeds, and other products. Though the seas in some areas are rough, the region as a whole, except for the Philippines, is generally free of hurricanes and typhoons because the Philippines is exporting typhoon even to China and Japan. However, there are many active volcanoes and island world which is actually very vulnerable to earthquake activity. So here now after discussing about an overview or giving you an overview of Southeast Asia, I'd like to point out what is the meaning of culture of a region. Because if we look at it from international relations, uh, from the perspective of international relations, they will define region as simply a territory or an area composed of various polities or nation states. But scholars would define the region simply as a socially constructed but politically contested. But here, from the perspective of culture, region is considered to be as a kind of cultural space, which is actually a specific area occupied by people sharing recognizable and distinctive cultural characteristics as well as cultural heritage. Consequently, the cultural region consists of a large cultural space which can represent an entire culture system and reflect cultural traits, beliefs, values, and complexes. So this is from the cultural or anthropological perspective. One scholar explained the concept of relation of culture and, of course, the region. So She said, cultures have a geographical dwelling or a space. And it's true naman, di ba? It is impossible for them, even for our Sama Bajau people, to continue the tradition without a space, even if they're staying more or less above water, no? Even if they're actually in the base in water. So, furthermore, they are united to a geographical environment and respond to it. The human environment and the natural environment can never be separated. Human beings leave their ontological markers on their environment. The reciprocal relation creates geographical milieu and cultural milieu. That means that culture and region are inseparable as concepts and as entity. So what is cultural region or cultural regions? First is that this concept is not new in the discourse of social sciences and humanities. According to N. Brown, although distinction between regions based on culture are as old as mankind, the roots of culture area concept can be traced to Europe, where the work of a German geographer, Ratzel, inspired the development of a Kulturkreis, or cultural circles. It was not in Europe, however, but in the United States that the concept of cultural area or cultural region gained real social scientific cohesion. That's in 1917, Whistler or Clark Whistler, an anthropologist with the American Museum of Natural History, used the cultural region concept to integrate what was known in that context of Native American communities. Whistler gathered together ethnographic data from a variety of sources and used this data to group Native American tribes based on similarities and differences in their subsistence systems, modes of transport, textile, artwork, and religious practice. As a result of this effort, he discerned a distinct geographic pattern with groups living in proximity or in similar natural environments sharing many cultural traits. So Whistler eventually defined 9 distinct Native American culture areas, grouping tribes that shared significant traits. And in the mid-20th century, geographer Carl Sauer reinvigorated the culture area concept within the field of geography by synthesizing the ideas of the European culture Chris school with anthropological approaches to culture area, culture Chris. And he argued that the diffusion of ideas from a few cultural centers had been the driving force in human history. His work inspired further research on the origin and spread of cultures within human geography. And here in our definition, I think I selected this definition as a basis of my discussion later on, because it is very clear here that the cultural regions may be defined by a set of cultural criteria, such as traditional farm and villages types or village types, traditions of land use, viticulture, and farming, traditions of nutrition, everyday practices and attitudes, traditions of celebrating holidays and festivities, a common historical consciousness, language or dialects for that matter, at the same time, religion and the manifestation or material manifestations of religion, particularly churches, chapels, crosses, and places of pilgrimage, and among others. But I think it is qualified here, Dr. Jordan qualified that there may be several other criteria. And many of them are rather symbolic, but they shape the identity of people, race, and living in this region and contribute to a common consciousness. Even they even said that, democracy is, or human right for that matter, is a commonality. So based on this criteria, let's start with traditional farm and village types. I think we can relate based on this that our climate and physical geography or environment mold the kind of life in Southeast Asia. And this will include common architectural design, of the kind of life, no, commonly of the kind of architecture and the kind of settlement that we develop in Southeast Asia. These are just only few of the examples of um, the architectural design that we can find in Southeast Asia, whether it is in the water or it's in the land. If you go to the northern part of the Philippines, no, even the Ifugao, the our people use the stilt architectural design. No? So stilts are common architectural element in tropical architecture, especially in Southeast Asia, particularly in rural areas. So in Indonesia, for instance, the construction of the house symbolizes the division of the microcosm into three regions: the upper world, the seat of deities and ancestors; the middle world, the realm of human and lower world; the realm of demon and the malevolent spirit. The typical way of buildings in Southeast Asia is to build on stilts, an architectural form usually combined with a saddle roof. And in fact, I can also include in my example the Romulo Hall, the building, old building of the Asian Center in UP Diliman. It's actually patterned after the stilt house. And stilts can be found in various provinces, even in Indonesia and Malaysia, the Malay houses. And if you go to Brunei, you can still see that in a modern Brunei state. The construction is sometimes called or locally known as the Rumah Panggung or the stage house, built on stilts. The primary purpose at that time, and even in Ifugao, is to avoid wild animals and root and floods, and to deter thieves and for added ventilation. In Sumatra, traditional stilted houses are designed in order to avoid dangerous wild animals such as snakes and tiger, while in areas located close to big rivers of Sumatra and Borneo, the stilts help to elevated house above flood surface. It is also present in the Philippines, and in the image, I think you can see the stilt houses are built both in water and land, and the people of Sama Bajau in southern Philippines even resided in stilt houses. The second criterion of considering whether that region is a cultural region is the traditions of land use and farming. And we all know, despite globalization and westernization and industrialization, we still have an agriculturally based, most of the countries in ASEAN have actually agriculturally based economy. And we are more relying to paddy agriculture, the paddies. In our history, the development of a permanent growing system, even with stable bureaucracies and reliable tax base, happened in areas where there was a settled population, like the large rice growing plains of the mainland and Java. So this is actually one of our commonalities. And right now, if you go outside of the UP Open University, you'll see still rice paddies, the Erie. No? So somehow, I think we cannot separate ourselves with the rice production, and it has implication. It molds the kind of culture that we are living. No? Especially that it molds or influences even in terms of our diet and even in terms of the way of life and rituals and celebration. So we cannot separate that unless we shift our production to maybe sorghum or wheat for that matter. But right now we are rice lovers, and it has also implication to our health because of high in sugar. Mm. So these are the example. It's not just only Ifugao, but I think from Indonesia and some parts of Vietnam. Traditions of nutrition, everyday practices, and attitude is one. So we have the diet, the rice, fish, and paste, no? Shrimp paste, no? Or fish paste. Like say in Indonesia, the terasi, no? Tayo dito is meron tayong bagoong and ginamos, diba? In southern Philippines, no? So it's practically even Singaporeans would love to the sambal, but I think sambal is a mix of chili, no? But it's more on terasi and other shrimp paste and fish paste based food. And then I think I included here the mapping of rice production. If you notice, then the green colored areas are more or less concentrated rice production, not necessarily the entire Southeast Asia. And that's the reason why we're actually importing our rice from mainland Southeast Asia, although Erie is here in the Philippines. And then, of course, has implication in terms of dressing, even in terms of our communication. So the languages, the terminologies that we use, connected to the kind of diet, the kind of practices that we are, and the geography of Southeast Asia. Even in terms of schooling, so it has implication whether it is a madrasa, no, if it is Islamic based, or it could be under Catholic or Protestant education. And seeking livelihoods, of course, changes because of the specialization of labor, no? Division of labor and the specialization of labor. We cannot do away with rituals. And everything that we are actually doing, we have different rituals. Even passing, just simple passing in the bush, you, we are always doing some rituals, di ba? Tabi-tabi po, di ba? Part yun ng system natin. And of course, other recreational activities that I'm going to discuss may be part of the festivities. In terms of traditions of celebrating holidays and festivities, there are so many festivities or celebrations related to culture, related to religion, and related to our way of life. This is actually, if you're familiar with this, what is the commonality, any common feature of the four images? The headdress. So we have Singkil, and then from Thailand, the center, and then I think it is from Vietnam or no, this is Indonesia. That one is Malaysia, and that's Singkil in the Philippines. Of course, they are performing arts, diba? But the commonality in our culturally based, they are all forms of Ramayana. We all thought that Singkil is actually Islamic, but I think we should correct that already. Maybe it's influence through time, no? The local, the blending of variety or diversity. No? The Ramayana that was introduced in Southeast Asia by originally from India were indigenized, localized in some form by local people. So you have this Princess Gandingan, no, in Singkil, for instance, and the Darangin, no, the concept of Darangin. Of course, we have this is it puppet, no? The wayang in Indonesia, and of course the wayang yang, no? Different performances. So it is good to pay attention to the prominent commonality in the region, the presence of the Ramayana, because the Ramayana is the celebration, of course, of Indian origin that has been indigenized by local people in each member country of ASEAN through the years. So practically all countries in Southeast Asia practice, observe, and indigenize this kind of cultural dimension. And there are so many. In fact, we can also include wood carving, no? The arts. We have so many similarities, no? Commonalities in Southeast Asia. Even the use of rice husks, no? Rice and even bamboo, no? And coconut. So similarities on that. But here in the celebration, it is just only one of the examples. We have the Thai Pusam, which are also practiced, no? Which is active practice in Malaysia, in Singapore, in Indonesia, and in some parts of Thailand. How about language? So this is actually the map of Asia, no, language families of Asia. But if you focus in terms of its category, no, in Southeast Asia, you'll see about two or three distinction. One is the Austronesian, right? The brown colored, the Austronesian. And then we have, what's the other one? Thai Kadai, the blue, the darker, no, the lighter blue. And Tibeto Borman, the pink colored. Because take note that we are in Burma or Myanmar at the time, no? And then, of course, the parts of Thailand. But generally, the bigger chunk of the speakers of this language actually is the Austronesian speakers. So this is a distinctive feature of Southeast Asia in its cultural diversity. Of the 6,000 languages spoken in the world today, an estimated 1,000 are found in Southeast Asia. How about in the Philippines? How many languages? The safe answer is many. There are about 170 languages. So imagine that if there are 7,107 or 108, depending on the low tide or high tide, Indonesia has about 17,000 plus islands. So imagine how many people or how many languages are actually spoken in the area. So linguistically, the mainland is divided into three important families. Austro-Asiatic, like the Cambodian and Vietnamese. The Thai, T-A-I, like the Thai, Thai, and Lao. And the Tibeto-Burmese, including highland languages, as well as the Burmese. Languages belonging to these families can also be found in northeastern India and southwestern China. Kaya may mga Mongoloid. No? Not the Mongoloid that we're talking psychologically or, di ba? But the real Mongoloid. Around 4,000 years ago, people speaking languages belonging to the Austronesian family, originating in southern China and Taiwan, or believed to be coming from China and Taiwan, began to trickle into island Southeast Asia. In the Philippines and Malay-Indonesian archipelago, this migration displaced or absorbed the original inhabitants, who may have been related to groups in Australia and New Guinea. Almost all the languages spoken in insular Southeast Asia today belong to the Austronesian family. Kaya that's the reason why it's darker. No? Most of the island Southeast Asia belong to Austronesian family. And let's proceed to the last, I think, criterion, and that is religion and the material manifestations of religion. Another important feature of Southeast Asia as cultural region or regions is the presence of religions, or I may use the right word, politically correct, religio-philosophical traditions. Because there are some religions that we believe cannot be categorized or should not be categorized as religion. Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, Christianity, and other traditional religions like animism and spiritism should not be considered, I mean, and Confucianism, by the way. Confucianism is a philosophy. So that's the reason why it should be called as religio-philosophical tradition. It is interesting to note that the diversity of Southeast Asia of religion has mapped the area into various, it's not only one, but cultural regions. Am I correct? It's considered to be cultural regions, religio-cultural region. Take note of Islam, with the cultural region to comprise Indonesia, Malaysia, Brunei, southern parts of Thailand and Mindanao, and small settlements in mainland Southeast Asia. For Christianity, the cultural region is composed of Philippines, Timor-Leste, and pockets of believers in Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore. In the Philippines, there are notable architectural projects of the Spaniards that became monuments and historical landmarks in the archipelago, such as the, later on, I'm going to show you the Mayagao Church as UNESCO heritage site. But if you try to look at in terms of the map of the religious diversity in Southeast Asia, the Philippines has only about 3 distinctions, whereas other countries would have about 4 or 5, particularly Singapore and Vietnam. with that. So Buddhist. So as for the Hinduism, the only area that remains to be Hindu is the island of Bali. However, in the history of Southeast Asia, Hinduism used to be the state machinery or tool in the foundation and maintenance of great empires such as Khmer, Majapahit, and Srivijaya. Such influence is best manifested by the presence of great temples such as Borobudur, Prambanan in Java, Angkor Wat or Angkor Wat in Cambodia, and many other uh, temples and areas in Southeast Asia. Islam also established prominent mosques in the region, and one of noteworthy to mention is the mosque in Brunei Darussalam. So you'll see the manifestations of religion, and in fact, right now they also serve not only as religious landmarks but also tourist destinations. But I think there were blunders committed during the colonial period. Come to think of it, that the idea of cultural region has been for many decades prior to colonization, but it was not really seriously considered. Like we can understand that because colonialism has its own reason and has its own purpose. So the neglect of cultural region as a colonial blunder, imaginary lines are designed by convenience of the colonizers, and we'll see that later on. And then we have disrespect of the ethnic, language, and religious groupings, which is actually related to that. And this neglect causes problems in present times, including ethnic tension and representations or recognition even from the majority of the population and or governments. And because of this, there were tensions between religious organizations. To some extent, for those tensions led to the basis of separatism and to some extent terrorism. So this is the imaginary lines, which are actually designed by convenience of the colonizer. If you notice then, we have some issues as colonial quote unquote legacies. We're supposed, Borneo is supposed to be part of the Philippines. But the British tried to design it and include this in the Federated States of Malaya at the time. The same thing that happens in mainland Southeast Asia. And even Thailand, though despite its claim of being an independent country, also was forced to give way, not to cede or to annex or let the annexation of some of its territory, just to maintain its independence. So as I mentioned, we have the disrespect in the ethnic, language, and religious groupings, such as the case, for instance, in Myanmar or Burma. So there were conflicts between the Karen and people, the Burmese, right? Or even conflicts between people living in Patani and Malaysia, and people living, I mean, the Patani Island, Patani province of Thailand. There's also neglect causes problems in present time, as I mentioned, because of the ethnic tension and, of course, the historical baggages or basis of separatist and terrorist activities. I don't want to mention some of these terrorist activities, but that could be an ultra-nationalist or ultra-religious, more than religious in a sense, the practice or interpretation of religion. So what are the prospects? How to use cultural region after knowing all those criteria, the commonalities and diversity of Southeast Asia? How can we use the cultural region as a concept? Being conscious of cultural regions, the ASEAN citizens will be able to contribute fully and participate lucidly in the effort of realizing the ASEAN sociocultural community. As far as I know, sociocultural community is even considered to be easy to collaborate than economic. to realize than economic. But now, this year, we're going to start the ASEAN economic integration. In the conscious effort of understanding our neighbors, the people and all stakeholders must continue the religious dialogues and enhance religious tolerance. So we have to have communication, we should have an open communication with various religio-philosophical traditions and definitely discuss and avoid possible problems later on. So from my perspective, I'm looking forward that academic institutions from primary to tertiary levels, particularly the primary schools, should serve as catalysts, in the active teaching of the core values of ASEAN culture and society, um, even in terms of doing it, even the international conferences, the UP, OU, the OU5 can do that. Even the Asian Center and other institutions can participate in terms of disseminating and expanding, the idea and understanding of a cultural region. And we need also to reach out to the primary students by using, because I believe that the younger generation should be the first to understand, should be the first to learn. It's not just only when we talk about ASEAN and Southeast Asia and the cultural region, it's not enough to study only the country or memorize the country and their capitals. We need to let them integrate, and understand why they are part of this identity. I think this is the weakness of our educational system for now. And it is the advocacy of the ASEAN Studies Program and the Asian Center is that we need to bring the younger generation to let them understand that the identity and understanding, comprehension, and appreciation of the core values of ASEAN as a citizen and as a member, legitimate member of the region should be to understand through interaction. And the people-to-people diplomacy exchanges and even interaction or holding such conferences at the lower level should be done regularly. Aside from that, there must be, or it is actually imperative and it is suggested that we should hold festivals. It's the ASEAN actually, as criticized also, mentioned last in the opening ceremony, that the ASEAN as a regional body is a body of governments, even until now. So an advocacy that instead of an organization of government should be an organization of people. And therefore, the people-to-people track to diplomacy should be encouraged regularly. And therefore, music, art, and film among ASEAN citizens should be encouraged to include even indigenous peoples, because we tend to discriminate, the indigenous people. We keep on talking about the development of ASEAN, and we capitalize even on culture and cultural regions, but we don't consider the indigenous people as regular, legitimate member of the stakeholders of this regionalism and regionalization. Let me quote Dr. Michael Tan, our dear Chancellor of UP Diliman, when he said in 2014, culture is not just history, is not just for history and archaeology. ASEAN perspectives can be developed in other social sciences, even in terms of sports, in terms of martial arts, and many forms that constitute cultural region. And there is an important element there, which is actually the cultural framework or frameworks. So the question is, what would food and nutrition sciences be without the camaraderie of eating? And I think Southeast Asians love to mingle, especially in the presence of food, right? Am I correct or am I correct? Mm. So teaching cultural diversity imparts creativity and innovative thinking. So relating Southeast Asia to South Asia and East Asia and to the world, even as we recognize the power imbalances. No? There's a need, like say, Gamelan versus Gangnam, or learning Bahasa Indonesia versus Italian. Importance of starting early to inculcate the appreciation of ASEAN, the body language, for example, and even of words. So from our end, we should not be, even from the Philippine point of view, we should not be comfortable only in our borders. No? We need to go out and understand others. So it's not a matter of othering. No? It is the matter of understanding. So we need to recognize, even celebrate differences, because some are quite irritated, no, when we say, we are different from others. But Dr. Tan, Chancellor Tan mentioned that no, we should celebrate differences because that is the beauty of diversity. And our cultural region and Southeast Asia is actually a good example of a cultural region because that these differences make our existence, our identity even richer. No? Contrasts are important in the sharing of cultural experiences. Example of that will be even the Philippine problem in education of boys rather than of girls. So in conclusion, the classification of human groups into cultural region or cultural areas or region has been criticized or critiqued on the grounds that the basis for this classification, such as similar farming systems or pottery stars, are always arbitrary. And I don't disagree with this. No, I agree partly on this. Despite this limitation, the organization of human communities into cultural regions remains a common practice throughout the social sciences. Despite that it evolved no, since 1800 until now, this particular framework or paradigm is still very important in understanding various, the way and life and even the various dimensions of region. Today, the definition of cultural areas or cultural regions is enjoying a resurgence of practical and theoretical interest as social scientists conduct research on processes of cultural globalization. As such, it is important to focus also on culture aside from economic and political security dimensions, particularly of ASEAN. Understanding of culture regions as guide in a more meaningful regionalism and effective regionalization. Regionalism is a project, definitely the state to state, and regionalization is actually the process which involve non-state actors also. We need to encourage the youth and the younger generation to maximize the use of culture as essential component of track to diplomacy. And we can only do that if we have the understanding of the concept of cultural regions. Now, we need to be conscious of these concepts. We need to respect the cultural region, not necessarily reverting back to the original, but by involving all stakeholders, including indigenous peoples, to be heard in the continuing discussion of regionalism, especially in the context of culture. And then we should have embrace the idea of alternative paradigm. We aim for ASEAN integration by emphasizing diversity and for reasons other than economic, with special reference on cultural regions. And I think we should do that now. It's not just only political security, it must be comprehensive regionalism. And that will include sociocultural or cultural for that matter. So with this, I think I'm now ready for question. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dean Joffe Santa Rita. I am a student of ASEAN Studies. I'm more a student of ASEAN Studies rather than a scholar. And I have learned a lot from the lecture of Dean Santa Rita, especially that culture and region are related constructs. Region is a cultural space while culture has a geographical space. And water is not a barrier but a bridge to interaction and change, and that's what characterizes us. as ASEAN as a community and as a region. The criteria and the prospects that were mentioned are actually means for me to reflect as the program chair of the ASEAN Studies Graduate Program. So at this point, as mentioned, our speaker is now ready for to answer any question that you may have from the floor. Or there may be some who are, I have to check my email, just a minute. Because the email was addressed to me. Okay, there's a question here. Uh, I Okay, this is actually a notation that to whom it may concern. Will this video be available offline? Yes, yes, definitely. Actually, this will be available online. This is not available offline. For those who are watching at this point, we are making this available online, not offline. This will be available at the UPOU networks. And so we are happy to share this to our students and even to the ASEAN community. This our colleagues from ASEAN region also checks on our network, UPOU network. So this person says that she did not specify where she's from, but she said she needs to go to her next class and really want to hear the whole talk until the end. So, but at this point, I don't know whether may I encourage those who are participating at the cyberspace to post your questions and send to my email. And while we're waiting for those questions, are there questions from the floor? Yes, Dr. John Serrano, the faculty secretary of the FMDS. Mike, please. Mm-mm.
Thank you very much. This is a very interesting talk. Dr. Lamenta and I and Larry just came from what was that, ma'am? Another dialogue on ASEAN. Yeah, it's about sustainability sciences, and I do agree very much that in many dialogues, we all talk about the economic component, and very although it's always said that we should talk more about the culture, and yet when we talk of the ASEAN, we can see very formal networks when it comes to AEC for the economic community. But for the cultural, um, there are some who attempts to form networks, and when they come together, I sometimes get that impression that they don't know where to start, how to
Mhm.
start, what to do. It seems to be a very it's an ocean,
Mhm.
and it's like how do we deal with this this very complex track. So
Mhm.
I mean I just want to ask, aside from what you have recommended,
Mhm.
um what what kind of very concrete action can we immediately do, like for example in that dialogue they were saying that we form a network, but maybe there will be so many networks and we cannot keep track of those networks.
Mhm.
So what are your thoughts on this? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. First, I think because regionalism is driven by government fiat, means government structure. So it must be the government that should start the initiative, no? Should initiated certain activities. We can start with government sponsored, I mean, cultural organizations such as NCCA to establish linkage with their counterparts in Southeast Asia, to start with various programs or various projects that will somehow call for more or wider audience or involve wider audience. The other one is you're correct that if you can start with a network, it can be a smorgasbord. But I guess we can start with guilds or indigenous people's initiative for that matter. Maybe those who are in the wood carving can have a some kind of an exhibition in all Southeast Asia, or maybe musicians can do that also. Because in the end, you can have a wide network of experts and scholars and practitioners and observers in related to culture. The other one is actually providing on cultural scholarship, especially for the younger ones. I'm really an advocate for, to give due opportunities to the younger ones because Rizal mentioned that kabataan is the pag-asa ng bayan. So we have to invest to the younger ones, and the best way of investing is to teach them at at the early age, because they will carry. It's going to be a multiplier effect once they entertain through, they experience, no, sending our younger ones to say experience for 1 week or 2 weeks or a month or longer in other places. They will have a different perspective of the country, and maybe erase some of those pejorative thoughts or stereotyping that we had or we have about our neighbors. So I think that idea of identity has to be strengthened, no? Although I don't want to say that we have to erase the idea of nationalism or patriotism for that matter, but if we're really serious to have this ASEAN as one identity, one community, one vision, one voice for that matter, then I think we should start with the younger ones. And one way of doing it is to provide scholarship for them. At least we should be thankful to the budget airlines right now because they can send them easily, to other countries as far as Cambodia and even the other counterparts in the region. Thank you. I hope I satisfy your question.
Very much. There's a question from Vice Chancellor Lumanda.
Could be very, very hard, difficult question.
Well, first of all, thank you. Very enlightening lecture. But I'm just curious what your views are on, the West Philippine Sea problem.
Oh,
And one thing that struck me in your presentation was the imaginary lines designed by colonizers. Would you say it's originating from something like that? The roots of the this current problem, and would you have some recommendations to, or solutions from a cultural perspective or from a cultural region perspective?
mhm. I think the West Philippine Sea is out of the context of colonizers' design, because in the first place, that West Philippine Sea uh, as an idea came as an issue rather came only in the later part, but it's between the Philippines and and Vietnam and the rest and China for that matter. So it's another it's a long history of conflict or interest of China because of the, maybe I can explain that from a concept of Chungko or a Middle Kingdom of China, the expansion that is part of our territory. But what I'm referring to as in terms of the imaginary lines are those that nation states or modern states that are established or constructed based on the design of the colonizers without considering it's not geographical, but it's on the cultural, from the cultural, ethnic, or language based divisions, in Southeast Asia. But as for the West Philippine Sea, I think it's more in terms, not in terms of the colonizers' um, design, maybe later on, yeah, with China. But for now, I think it's not part of that design. But the solution, if we're going to answer that, the solution is, given our capacity right now, the Philippines should definitely make use of our connection and membership in ASEAN. There is no other entity that can help us, neither the US, but it's still the ASEAN as a regional body that can help us and should help us in terms of our problem with China and the West Philippine Sea in collaboration with Vietnam and other countries that have interest, in that part area. And even the word West Philippine Sea and South China Sea are two, for me personally, are problematic issues or problematic concepts. Could be Eastern Asia or what? No. Eastern Sea, something else. Yeah. I hope I address your question. Mm.
Thank you, Dean Joffe. Let me read now a question from one of our students
Mhm.
who is located in Doha, Qatar,
Wow.
Lawrence Paison, John Paison. My question, he said, economically wise, CLMV may not be ready yet for the economic integration. What can you say about the readiness of all the nations of Southeast Asia in terms of socio-cultural integration or unification?
Thank you very much. The economic disparities would somehow that's correct. No, that's quite difficult, and it might be it will slow. It's not really to stop, but it will uh, it will be a slow process, of development of the integration economically. But I'm not threatened about it, because there were already manifestations of integration long before this 2015 integration. But as for the sociocultural, I think we are ready, more than ready, ever ready, in fact, to integrate. No, the only problem is the priority of the drivers of regionalism to interact. But I guess if it is sociocultural, it's not really an issue because we have more commonalities than differences. And if we capitalize, although it's quite an anomaly among the three pillars of ASEAN that sociocultural has not been realized first before. And I think it is the Philippines that is the drum beater. No, it was not really realized soon compared to ASEAN economic integration. But just to answer briefly, I think we're ready because it's not going to be an issue. Even our religion as a source of problem is also and can be utilized as a source of engagement. No? So through series of dialogues, it is no longer a problem for us. In fact, we can do some kind of an integration using this. We use this to capitalize, the cultural dimension of Southeast Asia.
Thinking. I'm just thinking while Dean Joffe was sharing his lecture about the online nature because we at the Open University, we always think online. And he mentioned about inculturating the youth. And I was
Mhm.
just thinking maybe challenge to Joanne and the rest of our faculty on how we can do that online because we can connect the ASEAN youth online. There may be some activities that we can do, maybe at the ASEAN Studies graduate program, in collaboration with the Asian Center. That
Mhm.
there may be things that we can do together for the youth online that you
Correct.
may possibly identify for
Yeah,
us.
since then, actually, my idea is to produce an animated clippings or video for that matter, which we can share that to, especially to the primary students, primary school students. Um, Short, very folk tales, yeah, Biag Nilamang, or because if we can, maybe we can start with Ramayana. No? There is a Ramayana animated film. Is it Sita sings the blues and Ramayana? If we can put this in our own in a vernacular, no, for the Thai, for the Philippines, and the rest, it can be done. No, so, although it's quite expensive, but no, it can be done. So I think our target will be what is the commonality, and we can share that. No, our legends or local stories, we can put this in a very tawag nito, it's a short version of that and then send it either for free or we can sell it in a lesser price and disseminate it to OU5 or to even to primary and secondary schools. So that could be the start. And then just like this, lectures also, and then performances, we can have this sort of production. No, we can disseminate it to our colleagues all over the region, uh, aside from the seminars and so forth and so
Ramayana online,
on. Yeah.
something like that. That was something that we can initiate. You mentioned earlier about the wood culture. Actually, the chair of the wood culture
Yes.
activity of UPOU is with us, Dr. Connie Habito.
Uh,
And maybe I'm not very sure whether she has something to share with us here on this wood culture activities that UPOU is having. Earlier, I have shared to Dr. Connie about the observation that I got as we div- produce the Art in the ASEAN region course. We travel around the 10 ASEAN countries, and nauna lang muna yung 5. And I noticed that the wood culture is very ingrained among the ASEANs, if I
Correct.
may say, as a community.
Mhm.
And that's very interesting, actually. A competition maybe would be
Yes.
a good activity for that. But I leave that to Dr. Connie in case she has a comment, and
Yes, that's
maybe
true.
with Dean Jope.
Yes, sure. Thank you, Prof. Connie. Ano, any programs? I think that is good. No, we can do that here in the Philippines. Maybe organizing for the 10 countries. We attempted to have these exhibits in the ASEAN, in the Asian Center, and well, it's good and it's bad at the same time because we got only about half of the responses coming, but no, the embassies, because for various reasons they can participate, but they have different artifacts, arts manifestation, start wood and paper and paintings, and I think and most of the those who attended or visited the exhibits really appreciated it, that at least they have this, even textiles, no. So maybe we can have that exhibition, a big international exhibition here in the Philippines, maybe in the Open University, to somehow do, because if you go to Bali they have a different style, if you go to Java they have a different style. Now or the from Paete, for instance, here in the Philippines, we can do that, and it's a combination. Maybe it's actually exhibit at the same time lecture, so that you can maximize, the potential and the exposure of the materials, and relate it to culture and how it is being, or how this particular design has has been developed, in relation to maybe agriculture or to religion or to other practices. Because take note that even sensual and sexual images are not really produced because for the sake of sex. Diba? So it could be the devotion. Like say in India or even in Bali, you'll see the yoni and the lingam. For us, medyo bastos, no? But for them, that is religious. It's part of religious devotion.
Baka mahirap yung tanong niya. Uh, this is not really, gusto ko lang dagdagan yung about the wood culture. Because when I went to Chiang Mai,
No.
there was this elephant, very similar to the carabao na ginagawa sa Ifugao. So I was like, oh, it's like I'm in Baguio when I was in Chiang Mai. And yung mga knitted, ano nila, it's very like yung the ones produced in the northern part sa Baguio. So it's really very similar. And going to the similarity, sabi nga sa Thai, we are sem-sem.
Oh, Sam Sam.
So I think there's really a good opportunity for us to have this regional culture. But my question is, how do we balance, or how do we reconcile that idea of nationalism and the regional culture? Because like for example here in the Philippines, or maybe in other countries in the ASEAN, we seem to be very national. Some are very nationalistic, and I've heard someone said that nationalism is actually very selfish.
Mm.
So we seldom hear, or we never hear someone I'm an ASEAN. So it's something that we will never hear from our youths.
Mm.
So where are you from? I'm an American or I'm a European, but you'll never hear someone say I'm an ASEAN because we're very strong on comes to nationalism. So how
Mm.
do we reconcile
Mm.
those two concepts or ideas?
At the onset, I think even until now, it's going to be painful process because you have to sacrifice a sense of nationalism. But it does not, if going to think of a regional identity, does not mean that you're going to lose your national identity. So in that case, I think we should do both, no, simultaneously, because it is the same experience that the European community, uh, the European Union, they experienced that before. No? It's quite a painful process. But in due time, I think if we started to have a regional identity or think of a regional identity as ASEAN citizen, then in due time we'll be able to balance, no, what should be the priority in terms of thinking of being a Filipino or being a Thai or being an Indonesian, and of course our interests as a member of ASEAN. So I know it's quite difficult right now to say when is exactly the right time, but uh, we start first with awareness, because how can you allow or tell these people, no, or even our Filipinos, to think about ASEAN, or to be an ASEAN, having an identity of ASEAN, if we don't start with the awareness from ourselves, di ba? Mahatma Gandhi, you need to be the change, no, you want to see the world. Aside from that, I think we should also ask our media. If you notice, then even there are so many things happened in the region, our media is, if not totally silent, is very selective in terms of how they will um, promote ASEAN in the Philippines. Barely you can see of very minimal, no, in terms of video. If there's maybe the coming of the prime minister or the coming of senior officials in the Philippines, or of an artist, famous artist in the Philippines, no, that's the only time that you can get, or maybe disaster happening in Thailand, or those things, no, the riots and so forth and so on. Only those things that you can hear from the media, but not in terms of what is actually what is the development of ASEAN at this time, no? In terms of financial, in terms of socio-cultural, no, even updates coming from ASEAN Secretariat, we can't hear that, no. Unlike in Singapore and in Thailand or in Malaysia, I can, even if I cannot understand totally the news, I can and see, you know, features of ASEAN, but not in the Philippines. So we must start with that awareness first, to complement, you know, the idea of of an understanding and maybe accepting of a regional identity, you know, before we go, because in the end it's quite really difficult to start with having two identities. Baka it's a confused, no, in a dilemma, no. Correct po. So yeah, I think we should start with that, no? And if we can't do that with the media, we can start with the primary schools to tell them that, you know, even in textbook, mahina po yung ASEAN as a feature, no, as part of that. We should start with that, introducing, no, ASEAN, not just only in the memorizing of the flag, memorizing of the capital and the names of the leaders, no. I think that is our problem in our history, no, in our classes. Now, memorize what are the capitals and so forth and so on. It's not enough. You have to do is, what is the similarity, the diversity, the differences of each member of ASEAN countries. We should do that. No? Bakit different, may different tayo in terms of languages, in terms of ethnicity, in terms of religion, and so forth and so on. So dapat nagsisimula tayo sa pinakabata.
For that answer, while John is saying about yung, when we introduce ourselves, we say we are Filipinos. We would not say we're ASEAN. I remember when I was studying in Malaysia, I'm always mistaken. I was always mistaken as a Thai.
Mm.
So I would always say, oh, I have an Asian face, but I would never say I have an ASEAN face.
Mm.
I would always say I have an Asian face. But just a side comment. But there's another question from one of same student, Lawrence Pison, in Qatar, and this is related to nationalism.
Mm.
The question is, don't you think that each Southeast Asian nation still has strong nationalism that in turn could affect acceptance of or respect of other nations' culture and tradition?
Yeah, for now, I think there's still a strong sense of nationalism. But take note that nationalism and the concept of nation is part of the imagining of a nation. We imagine the community. And it's Benedict Anderson said that. No? So there are so many uh, criteria, no, to definitely in the imagination of a community. So I think the strong sense of nationalism or patriotism, for that matter, may hamper also the understanding and even the acceptance of others. But this is a global. I mean, this is a globalized world. It is already a modern world, and technological revolution somehow facilitated the immediate connection or interaction, and therefore we should start. We should start in terms of changing that perspective. There's nothing wrong. I'm not saying that we kakalimutan na lang po natin ang sariling identity natin, but and it's not wrong, no, to have this sense of nationalism. But I guess we need to compromise. This is actually the time to call for compromise, because if we want to succeed, no, this particular regionalism activity or process, then we have to contribute. No? It's not just only the government initiative, but also the people, the non-state actors, even criminals should participate, no, in this process. Well, I'm not saying it's not a joke, but I think na transnational transnational crime is part of the regionalization process, or even di ba, avian flu and other health conditions. But going back to that, I think, as I mentioned earlier, it's quite a painful process, but we have to make a compromise. The strong sense of nationalism is not really bad, but we have to strike a balance, because in the end, we see that there are benefits for regionalism, particularly in the strengthening of ASEAN as a regional body. So I'm not saying that you're going to introduce yourself as ASEAN, no. But it's good to say I'm a Filipino. I'm a proud Filipino. In my blood runs the immortal seeds of heroes. Right? So I am a Filipino. I'm proud of Filipino, but you should also say that, I'm a ASEAN citizen. I belong to one identity, one community, and one vision. Hindi po 'yon madali, pero I think we can start, no. We should start as soon as possible.
Just maybe continuing the whole idea of cultural space.
Mhm.
The way I understood it is that the nation is also a cultural space.
Space. That's true.
So, with the idea of the ASEAN, there's an attempt to extend the border of that space
Mhm.
from the very specific nation to a much broader region.
Uh-huh.
Okay. But I think, given the porosity of borders,
Borders.
I think there's a need to revisit
Mhm.
if the way we have understood and practiced nationalism 50 years ago
Mhm.
is the same 50 years
Yes.
later. Because I don't think so anymore.
Mhm.
It has become different. And I think, I would be able to locate specifically. So I'm going to expand now my sense of identity
Mhm.
to where I came from
Mhm.
and to where I'm going.
So it's going to be a jump off
Ad-
board,
uh,
parang ganon.
no,
No.
the way I see it, the ASEAN is the bridge.
Okay.
I need to stand on the bridge to cross the other side, which
Uh-huh.
is the region.
Uh-huh.
No?
Okay.
So if the nation is a cultural space, and cultural space always holds two things. It's both the real and the
Yeah.
ideal. In other
Mhm.
words, I dress here because of some ideal self.
Mhm.
I am decent, but
Mm.
later on I will be indecent,
Mhm.
because I'm facing decent people.
Uh,
So this is the ideal self. This is not the real self,
mm.
So it's a mask,
Mm.
but it's part of me.
Mm.
So because I'm not sure now, at the time, 50 years ago, nationalism, the stake was we have to build national identity, even if even today I don't understand it, no?
Mm.
So, but we can take that as a given. In the case of the ASEAN as a cultural space, I'm not hearing what is the ideal. Is it integration? Is it unity? And these terms again are loaded because I
Mhm.
will be asking you, why are we not united?
Mhm.
Are we not? Actually, we are,
Mhm.
if we're going to look at cultural artifacts.
Yes.
But there is no systematic container that we can see all of them. We're united.
Uh,
Kasi there are regional film festivals, songwriting contests,
mhm.
conferences. So the irony is that there are many things that are being done regionally speaking, pero hindi natin siya nakikita as a kabuuan bilang region.
Region.
So for example, the Philippines or Manila is holds offices for regional organization or even
Mm.
international organization. But siguro the feeling is mutual, di ba?
Mhm.
They feel isolated from us. We're also isolated from them. So parang may disjuncture eh.
Mhm.
So ang naisip ko, kasi ano ba ang hinahangad o gustong mangyari kapag tayo ay bubuo ng isang cultural space.
Mhm.
See, remember, even the so-called festival, those were not simply everyday activities. These were also done for something ideal, like
Mhm.
thanking the God, di
Mhm.
ba?
Mhm.
Appeasing the devil,
So it's part of
etc.
everyday life.
Plus, addressing something beyond us,
Us.
like the whole concept of the divine.
Divine.
So, what is the divine in the ASEAN as a cultural space?
Mhm.
In other words, why should I be friendly with a tribe, di ba? And vice versa.
Mhm. Because the answer for that is we need to understand, no? We need to connect. Because you're correct that no, there's no the cultural region or the cultural space is there. No? All we need to do is to highlight. In fact, um, one author says that is Southeast Asia a jigsaw puzzle or simply a collage or simply a rose or a unicorn. No? Parang ganun yung idea. But yeah, I agree with that. Siguro why we propose that there should be a festival is that to highlight no that there is some because the commonality the similarities are there no the manifestations and dimensions of culture are there. The only thing is that how do we let our neighbors realize that we have the similar traits, similar practices? Because if we just simply say okay, the Philippines have this one, maybe it's similar with others, but how will you connect them? No, there is no linkage, there is no link. So I think that venue or avenue for that matter will somehow provide us, as in the us, to definitely know and understand better and maybe appreciate each other's trait or commonality in the region.
It's a challenge. The ideal of the cultural essence, the cultural space. I was thinking as you were asking that question, I wanted to answer that by saying that it's maybe the ideal maybe is the consciousness that I belong to ASEAN community, that you are a fellow ASEAN rather than you're a Thai who is a member of the ASEAN community. So I'm thinking maybe the ideal is that when you have that consciousness, when you are in a certain location or whether you are in your locality, you have this consciousness that you are an ASEAN,
Mm.
a member of an ASEAN community and not just a Filipino or not just a Thai. Maybe. I'm
Yeah,
not very sure, but maybe.
yeah, but yeah. Sige, go ahead. Mm. Uh-huh. Mm. I think more, well, you cannot separate the regionalization with globalization, but I think at the very basic is that at least you have that identity based in a region. So simultaneously, there are instances you do the indigenization studies on indigenization and localization. At the same time, you do also the regional because somehow at the end, in the intersection, they will meet and then complement each other. But the idea of yung cultural space, no, balikan natin yon is more on may mga issues kasi na may mga eclectic and may issue rin na syncretic, di ba? Uh, ang isang uh, issue dito siguro is yung case ng Malaysia and Indonesia, yung question nila on sino ba ang nauna in terms of batik, di ba? So, I think instead of saying na we are claiming this and without talking to each other, it's better to talk and say, okay, maybe this design is actually Indonesia, this design is actually Malaysia, rather than killing each other later on just because of batik, di ba? So may mga ganong issues na pwede nating i-elevate in a more dialogue in conversation and conversing and communicating rather than um, maybe staying only within our tower. Yes, ma'am. Prof. Fabito.
That I would just like to add to that batik issue,
Uh-huh.
because you mentioned something about the imaginary lines or
Uh-huh.
borders created by the colonial powers.
Uh-huh.
I think in the case of Indonesia and Malaysia, that happened, no? Kasi Malay lang sila before, and then Malaysia was conquered or colonized by
The
the
British,
British, and Indonesia was colonized
by the
initially by
Dutch.
the Dutch.
Uh-huh.
So yun na yung boundary when in
Uh-huh.
fact talagang wala yun before, 'di
Uh-huh.
ba? And now they're fighting over the batik.
Mhm.
So yun yung So I do agree na meron ngang mga indigenous initiatives dapat, scholarly initiatives, and
Mhm.
also on a regional level meron din.
Yeah, yeah.
Like sa ngayon, are there countries in ASEAN that encourage learning of languages? Meron ba?
Yes. Some universities, no, like say, primary. Well, I think not yet, no. But in other countries, like in Singapore, they are actually asking, no, or requiring students even at the primary level to study one foreign language, no. But here in the Philippines, I'm not so sure. Although I'd like to see that actually even in the primary to start with without any biases at all, but a big chunk of the population actually spoke or is speaking Bahasa. Bahasa. So maybe we can start with that. And in the case of the Philippines, it's not really difficult because we have similarities with the term. So we can start with, learning, not necessarily to be a fluent speaker, but if to be a fluent speaker, that's okay. But maybe just the familiarity on how to, if you're actually outside later on, once they mature, they can interact, no, with, even in just only saying salamat pagi or salamat siyang or salamat sore or makan, no, just to eat or minom for that matter, they should know, no. Those are basics, no, because even our southern Philippine, our brothers from the southern Philippine, they have this mix also of they can speak both Bahasa and of course their native the dialects or their Filipino, one of the Filipino languages. And isang ano pa siguro yung imaginary lines na kalimutan kong sabihin is that even our southern part of the Philippines have that encounter with Muslim brothers. Uh, they're even more alienated in the center of Manila, no? Rather than having this connection with their brothers in northern part of in parts of Indonesia and Malaysia. They can simply say, they are our relatives in the nearby island. No, you can hear the crowing of the rooster. So they are the relatives without the consciousness, or maybe they have the consciousness, unless otherwise they are being that they realize to be part of this imaginary line because of the navy of each country, because they are being pushed. But for them, it's a they are my relatives, no, without thinking of the imaginary lines proposed or designed by the colonizers and of the modern state.
There's a question here from a student. She made the comment that the lecture is great. And she has a question. What will happen after the ASEAN economic integration? What will happen to the different cultures and beliefs of the different nation? I believe that at some point, the differences in culture will be an issue. What do you think is the best way to address the issue, if ever it will arise?
There's so many questions, but maybe to answer that, after economic integration, the answer will be disintegration. But that's part, no, it's a cycle, no. But I think if the economic integration has been finally realized, it will have a domino effect, no? Because who knows that because of the frequent contact between the economic officers and players in the region, they because remember that in the history of Southeast Asia and of the world, along with trade, along with goods, the transfer also of ideas and of course of technology. So if that is my premise, I think culture will also come along with trade. Uh, Although it's quite, uh, it's quite limited, but I think that is possible. And if there were problems in terms of that will arise later on, when it comes to the socio-cultural exchanges. Am I correct? Yeah. I think because it's going to be a people-to-people contact, we have so many tensions already in terms of our interaction, no? The various cultural interactions, and we're able to survive at that time historically. How much more right now that we have all those facilities? So, uh, in what aspect? Maybe the question is, in what aspect of a socio-cultural dimension of ASEAN that there will be a problem? Because if it is going to be religious, it has been a problem since time immemorial. But there were already strategies or mechanisms that were employed by various stakeholders to address this issue. And that would be one is in terms of constant, no, the series of dialogues. Second is in terms of the intervention of the leaders, no, to do away with this issue on religious tension and even the issue of separatism and to some extent terrorism. I can't see of any other than that. No, maybe the Batik War. Uh, the issue is there. Maybe can have patented it. No, who's going to first apply for the patent? No, the commercialization. But you know, I don't think that it will be a very heavy issue, no? Or will create havoc on the part of the Asian citizen if integration will happen. Because through time, I think the clash, well, it's not a clash of civilization, but the clashes will be eliminated in the process of interaction. And for sure, it's not the clash, but it could be the syncretism, the mix, the blending of diversity when it comes to socio-cultural dimension. Isa pa pala. Because even in our practice, no, like say in religion, di ba, may Hinduism, Islam, and then Christianity. In the Philippines, it's not a total Christianity in the real sense of the word. Catholic, we have folk Catholicism here. Where can you find a Santo Niño being, danced or celebrated by the Itas? Di ba? Or the Abangan and the Santri in Indonesia or in Malaysia, for instance. No? Yung folk Islam, folk, even the indigenization of religion. So that means that in the process, no, through the evolution of this interaction, somehow produce some kind of a blending of various dimensions of culture.
When we attended the International Conference on ASEAN Studies twice, the ECONUS one,
Uh-huh.
ECONUS 2014 and ECONUS 2015, One of the questions I heard people or topic people were discussing informally is whether there's a need for an ASEAN language. What is your comment on this?
Ideally, but I guess the common language right now is still English. Um, Other countries would definitely have hesitant to select one, but if we base it in terms of the majority of speakers, then it should be Bahasa. Because even the Philippines is part of the Malay world, Dunya Malayo. No? So we can do that. Even the Vietnamese, some parts of it, is speaking Bahasa also. So if we can also learn Mandarin, where in fact it's not part of Southeast Asia, we can afford also to study Bahasa. Not Bahasa Indonesia or Bahasa Malayo, but Bahasa. Just Bahasa. So that because we have so many similarities, no? In terms of our terminology. So we can start with Bahasa. I can't find of any other, like say the Thai, because the southern part of Thailand can speak also Bahasa. So yeah, so I think ideally it should be Bahasa. Mm. So we should know, no? Yeah. Yeah. Save the best for last. It might be too difficult.
Naman po. Sir, yung lang sa ano, yung sa pag-start ng early ng pag-integrate ng ASEAN culture sa bata. Parang, di ba, kung mag-start ka sa bata, will it be an issue for the parents? Kasi syempre, kung ikaw parent, parang isipin mo na yung practicality ba na
Mhm.
paano ma-address mo yung isipin ng parent na ba't kailangan matutunan to ng bata? Anong parang anong matudulot nito sa buhay niya or sa yun po.
Mhm. Siguro kailangan mo nang reorient ang parents. Una muna sila, no? Reorient. But I guess if it is going to be a policy, part of the curriculum, with the explanation that, we're thinking it's part of the construction of an identity. And we need to engage with 500 million people or less, no? Maybe 300 million people, then I think that, konting ano lang yan konting explanation, no? The reorientation of the parents of telling them what are the benefits of learning from this, no? Because if we can afford to let or ask our students to study Korean or Mandarin or Italian or Spanish for that matter, we can also do that if we are only conscious and serious about it. So, kwan lang it's actually a political will on the part of our government to uh, convince rather than coerce, no? To convince our the citizen, no, particular the parents, to learn Bahasa. Uh, okay.
Question. In globalization, we can say that the Philippines and Singapore were culturally westernized
Uh-huh.
in some ways over the course of time.
Mhm.
In regionalism, could there be a threat that another Southeast Asian nation be Thailandized or Indonesianized culturally, like the influence of K-pop to Philippine culture, the South Korea thing? I mean, there could be one nation that would stand out. Should sociocultural integration mean appreciation of diversity and promotion of the diverse cultures to other non-Southeast Asian nations?
Okay. Thank you. Indonesia for many years wanted to be the hegemon or the leader of ASEAN, but for 48 years was not able to be successful in terms of being the leader. So much more, that is from the political and economic, much more in terms of the socio-cultural. Right now, because of it's going to be a developed country, Singapore seem to be or apparently is the leader of ASEAN, but Singapore is too small. And Singapore, in the first place, also borrowed some in the socio-cultural, diba? It's a mix, no? It's a mixture. So I'm not so sure if Singapore can also pressure or serve as a hegemon to pressure the adaptation or the adoption of their own culture. Because the yung Nyonya, for instance, is a mix of Chinese and Malaysian. Ba? Uh, and we have that also in the Philippines. We have Chinese, both Chinese and the Malayan practices. So I'm not can't think of that. There will be an imposition or a pressure coming from one group to be the Taiwanization of Southeast Asia or the Malayization of Southeast Asia. So parang because it's actually, remember that we have this mushawara, meaning it's consensus. So if somebody, a member of the community, will not agree to that, every this bright, no matter how intelligent, no matter how monumental the project is, it will not going to be successful. So if this is imposition because of economic or bargaining power, I don't think that the sociocultural will be imposed will be controlled by one hegemon only.
Let's give Dean Joffe a round of applause. This is a very productive and great afternoon. And we would like now to request our Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs, Dr. Mendy Lumanta, to give the token of appreciation for Dean Joffe for Donna, please. And we would like to acknowledge, to give the appreciation for coming here. We know you're very busy. And when we thought about this lecture series while we were in Baguio 2, 3 weeks ago, and we said that it's good to have this collaboration between Asian Center and UPOU in terms of celebrating the ASEAN Week. So let me just first read the citation. University of the Philippines Open University Faculty of Management and Development Studies presents the Certificate of Appreciation to Joffre B. Santarita in recognition of his valuable contribution speaker in the ASEAN Studies Lecture Series held on 28 August 2015 at the Audiovisual Room, UP Open University, Los Baños, Laguna, given this 28th day of August 2015 at the UP Open University, Los Baños, Laguna. Signed, Inocencio Buod, Junior Dean, Faculty of Management and Development Studies. And to give the closing remarks, we would like to call on the Secretary of the Faculty of Management and Development Studies to read the closing remarks of Dean Inocencio Buot, Dr. Joan Serrano.
Thank you. Let me read the message, closing remarks of Dean Buot. Dr. Joffy Santarita, Dr. Lumanta, Dr. Salidades, guests, friends, a pleasant afternoon. I commend the FMDS UPOU ASEAN Studies Program in joining the whole ASEAN world in celebrating the ASEAN Week. This ASEAN lecture series is a very fitting scholarly tribute to the emerging giant in Asia and the evolving discourse and ASEANology ably spearheaded by, should I say, our ASEAN Studies Program at FMDS UPOU under the academic leadership of our program chair, Dr. Jean Saludades. Thanks, Doc Jean, for moving mountains and swimming upstream, just so our program can take off and progress with our first successful batch of GCAS graduates last July. Of course, we are so grateful for the full support of the leaders of Asian Center of UP Diliman, from the then Dean Carroll, Dean Gonzalez, and of course, from our current Dean, Dean Joffe. I thank Dean Joffe for his resounding yes to be the very first to share a scholarly paper in our ASEAN Studies lecture series. It would be great if Doc Jean can have all the lectures documented and have this published in a peer-reviewed book. With that, congratulations to the organizers and thanks to our faculty and staff behind the success of this first lecture in a series. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dean June. Thank you, John. And we would like to thank everyone for participating in this lecture series. We would like to thank, first of all, our speakers and Ma'am Mendy, and all of you are here, and also especially our students who participated via web stream, Lawrence Pison and Chris Ofalsa, those who asked a question, and everyone who participated, though we didn't hear their voice. We believe that you're there listening to us. And also a special mention to the Multimedia Center for the technical assistance in web streaming this lecture. Thank you, everyone, and good afternoon. And we have some small, simple snacks for all of you. Good day.